Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lewis Granger from Boxfusion Consulting. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on this webinar to see how an Oracle Cloud technology can provide innovation with HR Helpdesk Solutions. So, in terms of this webinar, hopefully at the end of it you'll learn how you can optimize your HR Helpdesk solution across a range of different channels and see how a solution such as the one you're going to see can really help your business. Now, you'll probably know that this event is with Boxfusion Consulting and Kent County Council, so it will give you a real example of how an HR Helpdesk solution has been implemented with Oracle Service Cloud, and you will hear from Kent County Council today on their experience in implementing that and their journey with Service Cloud. And at the end of the webinar, there'll be an opportunity to engage with myself, who've been involved closely with the Kent County Council implementation, and some of the experts from Kent County Council as well. Just a bit of background about myself. As I said, my name's Lewis Granger. I'm a CX Cloud consultant at Boxfusion Consulting. So I specialise in Service Cloud, and I've worked very closely with Kent County Council throughout their journey in implementing the HR Helpdesk solution. So in terms of agenda, I'm just going to give a very quick introduction to Boxfusion Consulting, and then we'll move on to see the HR experience solution. So you'll get to see Service Cloud hands-on with the HR functionality added to it. And then we'll hear from Kent County Council. We'll hear from Richard Vince, who's the Professional Services Manager, who will talk you through their journey. And finally, we'll have a question and answer session. If people have any questions throughout, if you could add them to the chat screen, that would be fantastic. So an introduction to Boxfusion Consulting. We are a delivery-focused organisation specialising across Oracle's Customer Experience Cloud, Siebel and Business Intelligence, with a main focus on service, sales and marketing business domains. We have a first-time right approach to our delivery. So this is from engaging with the client on day one, running a workshop, gaining an understanding of the requirements, how they want the system to operate and fit in with their current solution or workflows, and then finally all the way through to the end of the project. And this really enables successful project outcomes. And one of our key differentiators is that we genuinely care for the success of our customers' projects. And we found that our key clients, such as Kent County Council, have been working for us long term. So some of our customers, on this slide, you should see that we've got customers from a range of different industries, and again, that's across the CX Cloud portfolio, as well as Siebel and Business Intelligence. So in terms of what you're going to see today, the Boxfusion HR experience, I want to introduce you to our actors for the day. So firstly, we have Charlotte Jones, who has a very busy lady. She has two roles. She's a support worker and a carer. So her life involves two different jobs. So the HR solution needs to take that into account. And then we have Ted Smith, who's the trust manager at Redbridge Trust. So this is the trust that Charlotte Jones works at in one of her roles. And once we've seen the end user journey for these two, finally we'll move to Jason Field, who's our HR agent. Okay, I'm just going to switch screens. So this demonstration will be divided into three parts. Firstly, we'll see the employee self-service journey of Charlotte. So Charlotte is going to log on to a self-service portal, and she's going to create a request to purchase an annual leave buyback. Before we run into the demo, I'll just highlight that this is a very quick overview of the HR Helpdesk related components we've put into Oracle Service Cloud. We're looking into doing a more HR Helpdesk focused event in September, again in association with Kent County Council. Also, if you haven't seen Service Cloud before, again I'll highlight that this is going to be a very HR Helpdesk specific demonstration, but feel free to contact us after this. I'll put my contact details up at the end and we can arrange a more bespoke demo for you. So going into part one of the demonstration, we have the self-service portal here. So think of this as an extension of your main website, a support website if you like, and this can be branded aligned with your current branding. So Charlotte's logged into the self-service portal, and again, I'll mention the branding. You can align that to your current business branding. And I want to point out a few of the items on this support homepage here. So in the center, we see featured self-service categories, and this relates to the knowledge base, and this is a key product differentiator for Service Cloud. It allows an organization to upload a bunch of content that can relate to their business needs and what their customers want to look at, and they can use this on the self-service portal to deflect customer inquiries away from the HR help desk and give the customer an immediate resolution to their issue. At the bottom here, we have a most popular answers section, and this is the system learning how end users are using the customer portal, the self-service portal. So whether they're finding, we have at the top here, the most popular answer is notice period. Potentially a lot of people are thinking of jumping ship, and we have some other answers here about annual leave buyback scheme, which we'll jump into shortly. Over to the right-hand side, we have a more manual searching of the knowledge base tools. This is a standard search. And so we have this tactical messages widget here, which allows the organization to broadcast messages across to end users. So whether there's a particular event, so for example here, Kent County Council run payrolls, so they might want to reference to their end users that there's a particular deadline coming up relating to payroll, and they can input this through the agent desktop in HTML. There's no need to go into the code to write these messages. And then finally in the bottom right here, Charlotte has access to her important contacts that relate to her role. So we can see the tactical messages coming across here. Again, we can add links within these, and we can customize these according to the contact. So as we saw earlier, Charlotte has multiple job roles. So she's a support worker and a carer. So Charlotte may have an inquiry that relates to either one of those roles, and it's really important for the HR help desk that they know what role that particular inquiry is coming from. So this is something we put in as part of our HR Helpdesk solution, the possibility of having multiple roles. So Charlotte's just going to change her role to the support worker role. And then she's going to use the featured self-service categories widget to drill down on the annual leave category, because she's got some concerns around that and some potential questions. So she's going to try and source an answer online. So within that category, there are 3 knowledge base items. So she's going to drill down on one that says annual leave notice period. And this is a standard text answer, but images and videos can be embedded within these answers. And what Charlotte's going to do is she's going to read that answer, and she's going to provide feedback. So this is really great for the organization, the HR Helpdesk, in terms of reviewing their knowledge-based material based on what their customers find useful. So Charlotte's just going to provide some feedback here. It doesn't always have to be negative, of course. She might rate it 5 stars, and in that case, this additional information dialog box wouldn't pop up. So another great feature of Service Cloud and to do with the knowledge base is how it self-learns. So it's seen here what other customers find useful relating to this particular answer. And as Charlotte's got 2 jobs, she accrues quite a lot of annual leave, and she's thought, oh, okay, I might be interested in buying back some of that leave for this particular role. So she selects the annual leave buyback scheme answer. And that takes to another bit of content. We can see here we've got an image this time, and the same options we have below. And within this piece of content, there's a link to an online form. And this is another part of the HR Helpdesk solution, these e-forms, which are built with Oracle Policy Automation. And these allow you to build complex web forms very easily through natural language using Microsoft Word. So building these forms doesn't take a lot of complex PHP code, for example. It's a really easy, maintainable and scalable solution. So if you're in an organization which legislation changes really quickly, for example, if it was a vetting process, then it's really easy to modify these forms to associate with that new legislation. So this particular form relates to buyback, and Charlotte can see some rules here. So she can see that she started working Redbridge Trust on the 1st of January 2013, and she currently got 5 days leave balance left. So in the background, the form calculates that Charlotte is allowed to buy back 4 days depending on certain rules. So Charlotte hasn't quite seen this, and she'd submitted she'd like to buy 5, and she gets an error message there saying, okay, Charlotte, you can only buy 4 days leave. Charlotte expands the areas there which relate to the conditions and how the rules calculated. She's like, okay, I can only buy 4. She selects for, and that submits a query to the HR help desk. It will also send out an email to our manager, which we'll see shortly, Ted, in part 2, notifying him that he needs to approve or reject this request. So Charlotte has a confirmation here with a reference number of her particular inquiry, and she also has, this is another great feature of policy automation, a hard copy of the request. So she can open up this PDF document and she can see what she's requested, so she has a copy of that. So moving on to part 2, we're going to jump into Ted's shoes. So if you remember, Ted's the manager of Charlotte in that particular role. So we're going to look at his approver journey. So we'll start off in his Gmail inbox, and automatically by the system, once they've retrieved that inquiry from Charlotte to buy back leave, Ted will receive an email, and that will say, the following inquiry requires your approval, and that will give Ted a link to the task details page on the self-service portal. So Ted Smith logs in. And Ted, as we saw with Charlotte, can see his particular job role there. So he's the trust manager at Redbridge Trust. If he selects My Account, My Dashboards page, this will take him to the area of the application, the area of the site, where he can see all of the information relating to his current tasks and his current inquiries. So we can see here in the inquiries raised by me section that Ted's asked a question to the HR help desk about contract extension. Also, as Ted's the approver for Redbridge Trust, we can see there's a section here called Inquiries Raised Within My Organisation. So he has an overview of what everybody's asking. Obviously, this is configurable and it's not desirable for everyone within the organisation to see everything. But as Ted has privileged access, he can see that. And finally, the My Open Task section, we can see here that there's an approval leave buyback request, and that's the one that came through from Charlotte. So Ted can drill down on that, and he can see some information here about that, and he can also see the PDF form that Charlotte saw, so we can see more information about the request. And if this was a more advanced e-form, such as a contract extension, a salary assessment, changes to personal details, for example, Ted would see more information here. And these forms are great because they allow you to build these PDF responses to the customer or to the approver, and you can really build some complex legislation and validation in there. So the forms do the validation and take it away from the HR help desk. So once Ted has looked at that content, he can choose to approve or reject this particular request. So in this case, he has approved it. So Charlotte will be able to buy back her annual leave. Now, as Ted's on the portal, he's thought, okay, I'm here now. I want to ask some information about my notice period. So he's gone to the Ask a Question page, which is another channel for inquiry creation. So this would be obviously aligned with things like email and phone. Also social channels as well. So we can type in the subject and the question. Again, he's asking about notice period. And there's also the possibility here for him to add an attachment to support his inquiry and also to categorize the inquiry. And what I want to show you now is a great feature called Smart Assistant, which is, I like to think of it as a last-minute deflection tool away from the HR help desk. So it's going to, the system's going to read Ted's request, and it's going to say, okay, we haven't quite submitted your question. We want you to have a look at this content if you haven't already and see if it helps you. And this will give Ted an immediate solution to his inquiry. So Ted's seen this notice place inquiry information here now. He's thought, oh, okay, that's really helpful. My question's been answered. And that has therefore been deflected away from the HR help desk. So moving into the third and final part of our journey, the agent journey, we're going to join Jason Field, who's our HR agent, and he's going to be using the Service Cloud Agent Desktop. So think of this as your sort of internal application that agents will use to respond to customer queries and cases, more complex cases as well. So from within the desktop, Jason's going to drill down onto his inbox. So this is where all of his work arrives. So think of this as an email inbox, for example. And we can route items to Jason's inbox depending on his skills and whether on his workload as well. So we make sure we have a nice balance of workload across all agents. So when Jason drills down into this particular inquiry, this opens what we call the workspace. And to the bottom right here, we have the thread, so we can see the automated response that Charlotte received when her inquiry was approved. So we can see that the reference number here has been approved, so she got her buyback. But Jason has a couple of items to tidy up in this inquiry before it can be considered as closed. So we have the category field here, so where we categorize the request through the portal. And we also have a tasks tab here. Now this brings us into another element of the HR Helpdesk solution that we have, which is the automated task generation. This is a great feature that when the inquiry is created, depending on the category assigned to it, it generates a number of tasks to help the agent solve this particular inquiry. So it makes them more efficient, and it also reduces training costs operationally, because Jason now has a list of tasks he has to complete. You know, he doesn't have to relate to training material or procedures for that. So Jason's able to drill down into these tasks and view more information. So these tasks may be ones that are completed internally within Service Cloud or externally on another system. So as Jason goes through these tasks, he can mark them as complete. And then finally, when he's completed all the tasks, he can send a final response to Charlotte. So he's going to use some standard text here to make the response more efficient. And he's going to add a little personal note to the bottom there as well. And these thread items are all recorded on this incident or inquiry object. So the agent that opens this up next, if it's reopened, will see all of this communication history. They won't have to go into separate records. So Jason's just finishing off here with his response. Telling Charlotte he's processed the necessary documents. He's clicked the send on save button, which primes his response, checks the disposition, so it's defaulted as first line resolution, and saves the record. And then Jason can move on to his next inquiry in his inbox. Now we'll move back to Charlotte's inbox. So Charlotte, who we started the journey with, she's had an email from the application that says, "Dear Charlotte, thank you for your inquiry," and then we can see Jason Field's message here. We can also see the administrator's message, which automatically sent Charlotte an email confirming that her request had been approved. In terms of demonstration, that's all I have for you today. As I mentioned previously, it was just a quick overview of the HR experience. We're looking to organise an event in September. So check your inboxes for information about that. I just want to summarise some of the functionality that we saw today. So firstly, we had the OPA generated e-forms. So this was where we saw the buyback form, and I mentioned a couple of other items such as contract extension, salary assessments, vetting processes that these e-forms can be used for. And these e-forms are great because they're maintainable by the customer. They don't involve lines and lines of custom code, and they can be embedded within the self-service portal. As we saw as well, a great aspect was that a file can be generated at the end of the interview, it's called, in OPA, so the customer has recollection of that. Then we saw the job role functionality. So in Service Cloud, out of the box, contact can only be related to one organisation, and particularly at Kent County Council, this was a bit of a problem we had to get over because they had people such as Charlotte who had more than one job role. So we built that functionality into the system. So we saw Charlotte change her job role, so then the HR help desk would know what job role that inquiry come from. Then we had the task generation. So this was when Jason selected the task tab on the inquiry workspace, and he could see a number of tasks that had been automatically generated by the application, which were aligned with the particular category, so how we would categorize that piece of work. So that would really help Jason to complete that piece of work as quickly as possible. We also saw the custom approval process. So after Charlotte had sent that request off, her manager got an email, and he could log on to the portal and accept or reject that request. And finally, we saw that customized self-service experience. So that's the branding of the portal to align it with your organization's branding, and we saw that we could change the job role and the approvals could be completed online. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Kent County Council now. So with me today I have Chris Steele, who is the Systems Development Manager, And I'm going to hand over now to Richard Vince, who is the Professional Services Manager at Kent County Council.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Vince. I'm the Professional Services Manager for the Business Services Centre at Kent County Council. And as the slide in front of you says, I'm here to talk to you today about our experience in Kent County Council in implementing Service Cloud. And apologies in advance if I fall into the trap of referring to it as right now at any point, as that was the name when we first picked up the product. So my main focus today is on how we've used cloud technologies to help drive innovation in the public sector. We're a big believer in innovation within the Business Services Centre. You'll also hear reference to the HR Business Centre during the course of this. And just to say, the whole point of this presentation is we've completed a major phase on a journey with this, but we are actually developing the products on an ongoing basis. So, let me talk to you a little bit about what I'm going to cover off in the next 15 minutes or so. I'll give you a bit of background on KCC and BSC, so you've got an understanding for the context of what we were trying to achieve and what services we're trying to deliver. Also talk about the reasons for migration. So just to be utterly clear, we already had systems that did call management and some degree of customer relationship management prior to getting Service Cloud. We just wanted to move on to something that was more sophisticated, which I'll go through. Have a talk to you about the project, which obviously we completed with Boxfusion. Talk about the objectives that we were trying to achieve, the benefits we've already reaped, and then talk about where we're going to go on from there. And then we'll have a look at some next steps. Okay. So, Kent County Council is one of the largest UK authorities. It's the largest shire authority. There are larger unitaries, cities, London boroughs and such like. And we support 1.4 million residents, have a current budget of £1.8 billion a year. Though obviously we're dealing with stringent government cuts. We work in partnership with 12 district councils and 289 parish and town councils. So we're part of a big group. I'd call them a happy family, but a loose confederation of warring tribes is probably better. We also provide support to schools and to other private and public sector customers, which means we're dealing with somewhere in the region of 900 partners and customers just within the areas that are currently covered by Service Cloud. And we have end users for our HR and payroll services, which is the original focus of this project, of around 90,000 people. We have an objective to save 25% of support costs in a sustainable manner over the next 3 years. To be completely honest, that's 25% of the whole council's budget, but the frontline services, the reasons KCC is here for the public, are obviously ones we have to maintain the level of service on and can't be seen to be making swinging cuts. Conversely, the back office can't get away with it either, so it has to be more efficient, more effective, more creative with how we're delivering our solutions. The Business Services Centre was formed in April this year, and it's from a combination of various different areas of IT, HR and finance within the authority. Our implementation of Service Cloud was in the context of HR, where we already have an HR Business Centre, which is what has moved into the Business Services Centre, and where we already had customer relationship and call management systems. Within that HR Helpdesk, we were handling around 70,000 phone calls per year, with an additional 24,000 inquiries coming in via email. Now, that's a large number, but then that's in the context of us processing nearly 70,000 assignments across 21 payrolls a month. So just to put that into context, when we talk about assignments, we're talking about jobs. It's local government jargon and system jargon for jobs. Because people in local government have a tendency to hold more than one position within the authority, they're holding different roles, which have their own different quirks through, so from a complexity of handling you're having to deal with the fact that they have multiple roles, which have multiple different rules, different managers, those kind of things. We're quite proud of the way we do it. We not only provide it for the internal KCC customer, we developed a service offering that's of interest to people outside of the organisation, whether parts of the service or the whole gamut, including things such as DBS checks through our own in-house system, provision of payroll bureau and various other payroll services. And that's been reflected in industry recognition. We won the Payroll World Award for the Best Payroll Provider in 2014, and we've got payroll assurance and charter mark accreditations for our general running of the payroll, but also our development of members. In addition, we've gone that extra mile with a BACS bureau, so we're fully registered by BACS for the handling of other people's money. The whole centre is built around a more commercial mindset around making sure that the customers are supported and that we're providing the best service possible. And that's where Service Cloud comes in. We were already using a legacy system that was a reasonably functional call management system, but we were coming towards the end of life on the contract for that product, and rather than looking to either re-procure or do a simple market test, we wanted to go to something that would actually take us a step forward, and this was for a number of reasons. We were concerned about the lack of secure external-facing self-service or portal functionality with branding on the existing product. Now, just to put that into context, obviously the vast majority of CRM and call management systems are either fully cloud-based or have an external capability. But we're required within local government, as all public sector workers and increasingly private sector handling public sector issues, to comply with a series of fairly strict security standards. Understandably, we're dealing with very sensitive information about members of the public. These, currently known as PSN COCO, were ones that our existing system was not capable of supporting. So although we could have our portal on our internal infrastructure, we couldn't push it out to our clients. Now, KCC has made quite a big strategic change of direction towards what we call a commissioning approach. Commissioning can involve the commissioning of internal work, but it also involves an increased use of partnerships with people who are not KCC employees or not Kent County Council organisations. And so the ability to have systems that support people outside of our infrastructure is utterly key. Plus, as I mentioned, we're a commercial interest. We have various brands. We want to be able to make sure that we can present something that looks in the style that we think is appropriate and actually has the appropriate brand on so people know that they are coming to the right place. But even then, even when we were looking at our internal self-service portal, it didn't allow us to handle the data in the way we wanted. We weren't able to handle en masse. Everyone was having to submit individually. So there were no efficiencies to be gained. It was just as much effort from our end of things as if someone had made a phone call. Plus, our services had evolved. As I've mentioned already, we have an increasing number of external clients, and their customer expectations are high. We need to make sure that we're generating income, having a very efficient service, but without having the service level drop, because otherwise you lose your customers. And you often find that in the commercial environment. You get the operations that are potentially extremely cheap, but where you get exactly what it says on the tin, and it's not about that retention thing because they're used to churning through customers. You get people who are extremely expensive and therefore look to actually encourage people to believe they're part of it, part of a bigger service, a more special service. We honestly think you can do both, but it's around being the most effective service provider possible and making the customers feel as supported as we know we want to support them. And in addition, there's no such thing as a captive client anymore. So I mentioned KCC is looking at commission services. We have to have our internal customers feel that they're being supported. Otherwise, their whole employment engagement, their whole feeling part of Kent County Council is damaged, and that's no good for the authority as a whole. We were also looking for an opportunity to reduce the number of systems across the business services sector, with the IT and finance functions moving in with the HR function. There were a number of different call management systems. So when we went out to look at this particular implementation, we wanted to be absolutely certain that it was something that could potentially be scaled up to be used for those areas as well. Single system, better client data, huge amount of insight and intelligence that can come from that, but also simpler in terms of maintenance, training, etc., etc. So, we elected to go with the Service Cloud system and with the implementation partner of Boxfusion. So just a quick note on Boxfusion. We found them to be genuinely consultative partners. The word consultant gets thrown around, and with a lot of partners it means that someone turns up, asks what your business processes are, and then churns through delivering them, or telling you why they can't be delivered. With Boxfusion, it was very much a case of us working with them to dig down into what we were trying to achieve, whether there were better ways of achieving it, their unique perspective and experience combining with ours to come together with a full business requirement, and actually then trying to develop something that was as good as or better than we'd envisaged when selecting the system. We're extremely pleased with the relationship we have with them during this implementation project and with our ongoing relationship. So phase one was the replacement of the existing system and service users, so the HRBC's capacity for handling calls and some of the workload that was coming through. It should be said, this is not a like-for-like replacement. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they're replacing a system is to say, initially, we'll get it to do what the last one did, and then we'll develop it. The drawback with that is if you genuinely replicate the limitations of the service that you already had, or the processes and procedures you already had, then what you end up with is a system that people don't buy into. They don't find the benefit of it. They can see that there's a lot of money spent on replacing the system for no end result for them. So even if the intention is fully just get it in and then start to maximise the abilities of the new technology, you're left with a situation where people engage with the software where they're not as keen on the overall product. So although this phase one was a replacement of the existing system and service users, this was around replacing the existing service provided rather than necessarily the way it was. It was around reviewing things like our categories. It was around reviewing workflows and automation, the handling of calls and queries. We only had 10 weeks to do the implementation before the end of the contract life, which was obviously a fairly tight timeline, particularly as you'll see from the timeline on the right-hand side of the screen. It included covering off the Christmas period, which is always fun. We had an on-site consultant, but in addition remote support overseas. There was a dedicated KCC project team. Once again, it always seems like a lot of money to free someone up from doing the day job from the business, but you have to have them within your project team. You must have that intelligence and that drive and that understanding of how it will actually help the system. Apart from anything else, they're a great champion. We also implemented on the basis of knowledge transfer, so we wanted not to be able to keep the system ticking over by the time Boxfusion left us with our beautiful shiny new Service Cloud instance, but to actually be able to have us go around exploring how to develop it, pushing some of the developments forward ourselves. That gave us a better understanding. It helps us with the business requirements where we do need to go out, and it means that we're constantly finding new things we can be doing with the system. So it becomes an evolutionary process as well as the phases. And we kept the stakeholders involved from the outset. It is no word of a lie to say that when this system transferred over, both in terms of the front-end users and in terms of our back-office teams learning a new system, we had comments saying that this was the easiest and simplest transfer system they've ever had, and they could already see the benefits of the new system. So we successfully implemented in time for January 2015 and then closed the legacy system down in February, moving over a small amount of history, but largely speaking it was around making sure we had an archive of that history and having a clean slate from which to proceed. So this is the unified system for the HR Business Service Centre that's been put together. So you'll see that the inquiries and the e-form submissions come in and logged by the system. So just a quick note on e-form submissions. They are where we have a system for capturing data that otherwise would not come in through self-service. We have a fairly extensive self-service offering on our Oracle platform, and on our other platforms we're increasing the use of self-service. But there's still some areas where either because they haven't been developed or because the capabilities would not be particularly good, or simply because of the requirements of the customer, we are not able to deliver it all by self-service. So there we have an e-form front-end portal that we've built independently. We also have some spreadsheets that get submitted. Regardless of the route through which they come in, if they do not come in through self-service, they go into Service Cloud, as do all of our inquiries. And we've then got this single unified system sat there in the centre of that screen, which pulls together all of the intelligence on the customers, and we can then also allocate out the work to the appropriate queue. The appropriate team can pick it up. There's a strong liaison between the help desk and operational functions because they can see what each other is working on for a given customer. There's also the possibility to change tracks. There are a number of occasions where what starts as an inquiry turns out to be a request for some work to be done. And there are also occasions where what starts as an e-form is because there's actually an issue that needs to be explored and they're trying to change it by submitting a form. We can now jump those tracks. We start getting a lot of benefits out of that. There's improved tracking within the system, but the customer experience is also unified. There's an increased chance that members of the team will know what is going on with the area of the customer, which means when they call through, we can see the chases, we can see the other things they're requesting to be worked on. Our people out in the field can log in and have a look and see what the latest communication is, the issues that might get raised when they go and have a meeting with the team because of what's currently in train and the work. We're also to get enhanced MI out, which means we're able to evidence the service that we're providing in terms of SLAs and turnarounds, and do performance monitoring. One of the biggest benefits of these kinds of systems is ensuring a consistency of customer service regardless of who picks up the phone, and it's there's a major thing in that, in not necessarily targeting people who are underperforming. It's about making sure that everyone is being consistent to the levels and standards that we have. And we're able to get a lot more information out around that across the gamut of procedures that we process through the system. So some of the benefits, particularly of Service Cloud. The system is highly configurable. It has an enviable flexibility, which obviously is partially because it's cloud-based. You need relevant that therefore makes it getting more process efficiencies through users.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, we're able to monitor that we're achieving into, as I say, the automation. We're also maximising the synergies between systems. We're largely an Oracle-based user system, so the fact that we've now got an Oracle CRM product, albeit one that makes the best of having previously not been one, is absolutely fantastic in terms of drawing the systems together, seeing where we can have overlaps, integrations, uploads between all of our various platforms. The smarter user management, none of that rummaging around in the admin section of the system looking to see if we have the appropriate licenses. It's a lot more logical. We can also give people an access that correctly reflects what they need to do. So it gives them access to all the areas that they need to, so they're not spending their time going to someone else asking if they can do a particular action for them, without necessarily giving them access to a whole load of stuff they don't want, which apart from the security considerations also means people are wading through vast menus unnecessarily. It's a lot easier to put together a proper profile of people in the system. And it's the foundation for future development. There's a huge amount that we can do to drive it forward. So we're really excited about what we can start doing. We're exploring our options around potentially handling case management, project interacting with some of our finance procedures, looking at the ICT help desk to see whether there's any benefit in transferring over onto that. There's a lot of work we want to do where we're saying we have put in an HR system, but that's not what it is. It is a customer system. One of our big ports of call for development in the future is looking at the business opportunities. We can use this as a true customer relationship management system, picking up hot leads, seeing about the customer care side of things, so when they've received courtesy calls, when they've had all meetings from people just checking up on account management meetings, checking up on the quality of the service that's been provided. You've got to see how recently those have taken place, understanding the issues that were raised from them, which means people go in with a lot of knowledge and consistent services provided. So that work again. So what are our next steps? This month we're looking at bringing on phase 2, which is some of the further developments, further automations, improvements to some of the MI. We're also looking at onboarding the remaining teams within the Business Service Centre, as I mentioned, where the synergies are appropriate, going to a single system using the best technology out there, which we think is Service Cloud. We then want to explore the portal. The knowledge base is something which we didn't have the time to develop for phase 1, and it's where we potentially run the risk of coming a cropper of that loss of momentum thing I mentioned earlier. Knowledge bases are so important. They are a huge amount of effort, and I don't think anyone really appreciates the amount of effort that's necessary to get them in place. It's worth doing. You may not be able to do it in time for your initial implementation. In fairness, Service Cloud combined with OPA has a lot of benefits in terms of the ability to use the raw data, but it's very important that you put it together because it means you can minimise the avoidable contact by people getting the information they need off the front end of your system. I mentioned earlier we have a system for e-forms, and where self-service continues to not be an option, we're looking for people to actually use the front-end portal of Service Cloud to input it rather than not a system that then pushes information through to an email. And that big issue of handling bulk information, so where we can get the information in a format where it can be uploaded into the end system, that we're able to extract it in that way and load it rather than have additional hands handling it or still treating it on an individual basis. And as I mentioned, we're looking at the business team, business development actually taking part of it in terms of onboarding, business team and sales, and that critical thing of people being able to go in and meet a customer, knowing what is going on with them. everyone accepts that every so often you won't be 100% up to date with all the communications you have with a large organisation, but you do not pass the chump if you turn up to a meeting that's an account meeting and you don't have the relevant knowledge because it's been a couple of weeks since you've been in the office. So if you can make sure you're able to pick that up from a central repository, you go in briefed and the level of customer service improves. So as I say, we're still developing, we're still progressing. So we'd love to invite you to come and see us in September, see how we got on, and we'll talk a bit more, and we're happy to talk to people about all of the details of the implementation and see where we can find partnerships, and also the work with Boxfusion, which, as I say, has been absolutely excellent, and we're really grateful for the opportunity to talk about what they've done with us and what we've implemented today. Thanks very much for listening. Cheers.
So thank you very much to Richard Vince for delivering that overview of the HR Helpdesk implementation at Kent County Council. So hopefully you found that talk very interesting and great insight to what has been a very successful HR Helpdesk implementation. So we now move on to the question and answer session. I can't see any questions in the chat section, so please, if you have any questions at all for either myself or I have alongside me Chris from Kent County Council, then feel free to add them to the chat section. If there aren't any questions there, Chris actually has some really great questions prepared which we can run through in terms of delivery expectations and any problems they've come across when implementing this solution. So I'll hand over to Chris now, as there doesn't appear to be any questions on the chat.
Thank you, Lewis. So I thought I'd just start off with a few sort of obvious questions. So normally the top of the pile is how much does it cost? Obviously we can't give the exact details due to commercial sensitivities, and it's a bit about how long is a piece of string. But Oracle's we looked at quite a few systems when we chose Service Cloud, and Oracle's licensing model is quite interesting in that you have a set amount of users or sessions, depending on what you buy, over the length of the contract. And you can, as long as you use up those amounts by the end, then it's fine. So if I give you an example, if you have 100 users over a 24-month contract, you have 2,400 user sessions over the length of the contract, which means you can use, if you only use 10 in the first month, that's fine. You've still got 2,390 to use for the rest of the contract. So it means you don't have to be every month watching how many users you've got on or using the system. And if you have peak periods like we do, then you can obviously put more people on to help out, and then have less the next month. So it saves you sort of worrying about it. And then sort of all rolled in, you can, there's licenses for users, OPA sessions, as we've already talked about, the cost of mailboxes, and also things like chat licenses. So it really kind of depends how you want to use it, and how much you want to use it, I suppose. So it's very scalable. I had a question about one of the things we had to consider when we implemented it was whether we route all of our inquiries, as we call them, instance, whatever your flavour, into one mailbox or not. We have quite a diverse range of customers, and they all currently have different mailboxes or different contact routes for different types. So we do a lot with schools and with different organisations, so generally have different email addresses. We decided, partly because of the speed of the implementation, and partly to keep things simple, we didn't want to change our contact addresses for everybody into one email address. So we kept them all separate. We managed to do that by what's called transport rules, which was a real godsend actually, because basically it was something that we implemented on our mail exchange. So everything that arrived into our mailboxes could then be automatically forwarded on into Service Cloud. So the end user didn't see any disruption to service, didn't need to change their email address to who they were emailing to. And then actually, when we got them into Service Cloud, it enabled us quite an easy way to then divvy up that those inquiries into what Service Cloud calls queues, which is kind of like a mailbox in Outlook, as it were. And we've kind of already touched on this. What was our biggest challenge? And I think generally, whenever I put in a system here, always the biggest thing that rears its head is multiple roles, job assignments, whatever you want to call them. And it was no different with Service Cloud. The solution we came up with, I think, was very good and quite it filled basically all our needs. It did have a slight repercussion on the data loads of the information, because that made it somewhat more complicated in terms that we have two different sets of HR payroll systems here, so we had to get the information from two different places, which is never ideal. But because of the multiple job roles, we had to load the data in, and then also then load some data out of Service Cloud, so then load in the next lot. So there was a little bit of jiggery-pokery around it, but in the end it was a very nice solution to be able to get all of your information into one system.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Hopefully that was invaluable insight. As there aren't any questions in the chat bar, I'll wrap up. Hopefully you've all found this webinar really useful in terms of how you can implement a HR Helpdesk solution, and hearing from Kent County Council as a customer that has experienced this journey. Hopefully that's been great insight, and you've picked up some really good information from Chris and from Richard. So as I've mentioned previously, look out for the follow-up event to this in September. I'm sure you'll hear from us shortly. Also feel free to contact me on the details shown on the screen, either by email or by phone. I'd like to say a big thank you to Kent County Council for engaging with us in this session. Always a pleasure to work with them. And yeah, that's it really. So thank you very much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day, and speak to you again soon, hopefully. Thank you.